Okay, I'm Kelsey Frank, and I live in Tsawwassen. I'm a member of this group that concerns citizens of Delta South for some time. We started this in the latter part of June of this year, mid to late June. So I'll be doing the presentation, but I have a couple of colleagues along that are more than capable of doing the same thing. Roger Hugi is our campaigning and canvassing director, we'll call him. He's been appointed that as of this evening to make himself a lofty title. And probably has collected more in the way of petitions and worked pretty hard at gathering up the petitions and signatures on the petitions. And Richard Schroeder has the honor of hosting our meetings every Thursday night. That's repeating his wife soon, and has been sort of a major right-hand arm to a bunch of us in getting this thing organized and making progress.
Where do you meet?
We meet at Richard Schroeder's kitchen, and that keeps our group nice and small, and gave us a way of putting a limit to the number of people that sort of try to organize things. I put this slide, we'll call it up first, and I'm going to sit down a little bit so I can drive. We don't have a laser printer, but I've discovered that the cursor might help us a little bit. One of the things we've learned in doing a number of these presentations is some people, maps are a natural, other people not so much. So here, of course, is the border down at the bottom edge. This map is arranged north-south, and we have 56th Avenue, which all of you will know that pretty well runs right up through the middle of the image. The parcel of land of concern is shown with a red X in the middle or on the edge of a large green parcel. Forest by the Bay subdivision is here. Town Center Mall, as you can see, is here with the arrows, and Winskill Park is up in this area. Now, one of the things that there has been a considerable confusion about is which lands are in the ALR, the Agricultural Land Reserve of British Columbia, and which are not. And the reason this is important to understand is that the rules and the inherent positions of what landowners can do vary considerably between whether the land is just zoned agricultural or whether the land is formally a component or an element of the Agricultural Land Reserve. The other confusing point, I'm going to come back to that first one in a moment, is what did the Southland Settlement incorporate and what did it not? This land is not part of the Southland Settlement with Century Holdings. This land was never owned, well, at least as far as we could tell back into the 70s, by Century Holdings. So this is about a 45-acre parcel, 45 and somewhat, and it is owned by a numbered company and has changed hands over the years numerous times, and we're going to get to that in a few moments. It is, however, zoned agricultural by Delta, and these lands showing AGR that are not covered by the red X were part of the Southland Settlement. So they are zoned agricultural where they're green, and the salmon colored is residential. And that is where Southland Village is being composed by Century Holdings. Approximately 900, 950 residences will be built there. As you've seen, the trucks and the landfill has been coming and going for a long, long time. Many years, and houses are, I don't know the exact deadline, the exact schedule, but houses are probably imminent, the first of the actual construction. Now, this land that's shown as green and AGR is owned by the city of Delta. The Southland Settlement in round numbers was 80% went to the so-called We the People, Delta, as public ownership, and 20% was rezoned and kept by Century Holdings with a rezoning permission that allowed them to build houses. There was also an exchange of $9 million, which allowed for irrigation improvements in this corridor here to help provide better irrigation and drainage and water control over this parcel of land. So I'll stop there on that explanation. We're going to come back to the difference between agricultural land reserve land and agricultural land in a moment, because it does affect what you can do on the land and so on. But it's important to understand the difference at the get-go. Now, a wrinkle here is that Delta is in the process of applying to put this land that it now owns into the agricultural land reserve. So this designation AGR will change slightly to ALR, and there's reasons for that that are complicated, somewhat complex, we'll say. But Delta has negotiated to retain control over what goes on, what activities are allowed on that land. So although it's in the ALR, Delta has negotiated pretty tight control. You're not going to find, I don't think, threats to what goes on in that land. Delta is really committed that it's agricultural activities, soil-based agricultural activities. I welcome questions at the end about this. This is an important introduction to get a sense of what's been happening. I'm going to move now to, we'll have a brief commercial interlude in the yellow. We welcome people to join our canvassing team. The pay is steady. We're always interested in people that are willing to petition and hand out flyers and so on. So speak to Roger if you have an interest in that.
Do you have similar problem with the above AGRs?
No, there isn't actually. This section of land right here is only shown to illustrate that our activity is focused at Tsawwassen. It's not just focused at that piece of land. That piece of land is going to be the discussion, the point of our discussion, or the focus of our discussion. But there are other agricultural lands still within what we would consider Tsawwassen proper. And that's up the north side of the Baptist Church, out to Highway 17. That is owned by another individual entirely, and it is also zoned agricultural. Now, we ran into a little bit of confusion last week where someone says, oh no, that's already in the ALR. Well, according to the maps, it's not. So we're leaving this as designated Delta owned, or Delta controlled, agricultural land owned by a private landowner. We are not focused on that at this time. Any bylaw changes that come from our work that relate to Delta-owned agricultural land in Tsawwassen likely would encompass that as well, because they would name it by type as opposed to a particular piece of land. That's for Delta to decide how they're going to handle that. It's not the focus, frankly, of our group at this time. In late June, there's the three people from our group, if you wanted to know how names are spelled and so forth. This is the Concerned Citizens of Delta South. Our website address is there, and you might hear me occasionally refer to us as CCODS. It's the acronym that we use when we're talking in shorthand. In the mid to late weeks of June, Dick and Roger live very close to this particular, where these pictures were taken. This excavator, the evil monster in the lower right corner, showed up, and it removed, and I have a lot of other pictures if you wish to see them later, it removed the underbrush from that lower left picture. And that soil that appears in that rectangle, the lighter colored material, was deposited upon that land. Now in Delta, there are requirements for soil deposit permits. Even as a farmer, and farmers have a tremendous amount of privileges under the Farm Practices Act in British Columbia. But dumping unknown soil hither-dither at any time is not one of them. They have the rights to bring a certain amount of soil without kind of without any sort of bureaucracy once or twice a year to do something. This was not one of them. And that was dumped on the, no one knows where it came from or what it is. But that, our neighborhood watch is pretty strong, pretty vigilant. And when this thing is snorting and growling in your backyard, it's pretty hard to miss it. So this was a call to action in our neighborhood. Almost every Tom, Dick, and Harry that was in shouting distance got involved with this and were quite alarmed. What the heck is going on? And through some casual chit-chat, it became aware that farming was not the activity, and we'll get to that in a moment. So we formed this group, and our sort of motto or our dedication is to preserve Tsawwassen agricultural land for open-air, soil-based farming. And these are pictures actually taken from the site. Over the years, we've got all sorts of pictures. It harbors, it grows potatoes, it grows peas, it grows wheat, it grows almost anything we seem to put in the ground grows there. And this year it grew potatoes, which is the most common crop that is grown there. Now, our objective at this point for CCODS is very clear. It's very focused. We have avoided getting diluted or diverted. It's to ensure the continued use of the Guichon property, I'm going to come back to this name in a moment, for open-air, soil-based farming. That's what our objective is. You could say, well, it doesn't say anything about greenhouses, it doesn't say anything about pro or con this, it doesn't say anything about politics, and that's correct, it doesn't. There's nothing to do. Our dedication is open-air, soil-based farming. Jumped ahead a slide here, I'm sorry. The use of the term Guichon property is, the Guichon family, as you know, one of the granddaughters was just elected to Delta Council, is a strong family name in the Delta area. It goes back an awfully long time. And it's somewhat unfortunate that this name is being associated with this piece of property in some ways. It's because that is the way the property is referred to in the Delta OCP, Official Community Plan for Tsawwassen. Because that is the way it was referred, that is the way we continue to refer. But from what we can tell, the Guichons have no ownership or involvement in the ownership of this property at this time. I just want to be clear, they have, from what we can tell, zippo to do with this.
But they farmed it for many, many years.
They did, mostly under lease at this point. So, we'll jump into some of the reality of this. It's a confusing story and it may have a confusing ending. The assessed value, a number of you are Canadians and live in Delta. A number of you may not be and may not be aware of how this works. Farmland is assessed for tax purposes at values that are way, way, way below market value. So the bottom section of the slide down in here shows the history of commercial transactions that have occurred in the sale of this property. In 2003, it was sold for $3.2 million. These are Canadian dollars. At the end of November 11, it was sold for $6 million. On October 12, 2016, it transferred title for $12,500. For $12,500,000. In June of 17, it was listed for 23 acres. In other words, less than 2 years later, less than 1 year later. And then relisted again in March at the same 23 acres. That expired on the 12th of September of 18. So there was a contiguous period of a year where the ask was 23.8 when the buy was 12.5. So this listing was withdrawn from the public listings shortly after the stop work order that I showed you in the previous slide about that soil. And I should have emphasized that that's what led to the stopping of water. Dumping, I said it was not permitted to dump soil. And when you do dump soil, that stops. That raises eyebrows and the stop work was put in place. So, if you were looking for speculation, signs of speculation, this would be one thing that would raise your eyebrows. Now, there are snippets here in the right-hand side of the page that list the attributes of this parcel for sale that appeared in the June 19 and March 12 real estate listings. And if you take the handwritten, I'm sorry this is hard to read on screen, and read those attributes, you won't find any of them have anything to do with farming. You don't get that kind of money for farming. And those attributes are not to do with farming. And you don't have that kind of price related to farming. In the meantime, in the upper left, the assessed value on this land is $103,863. That's not a misprint. That's the assessed value. And the taxes accrued from that assessed value to the city of Delta were in the round numbers of $2,500 for the year. That's what that land wanted. So there is a dichotomy between the way land is assessed and then taxed, provided that it's farmed. And yet it's listed with attributes that have nothing to do with farming and statements that says it's available for rezoning potential. This works out to $273,000 per acre when it was sold, and the ask was $523,000 an acre. From a market perspective, this is in the 5 to as high as 10 times market value. And it seems unlikely that given those numbers, that open air soil-based farming, or farming of any type, is sustainable on this land. It doesn't fit. The dollars are not there. The dollars don't match the return. In the chit-chat that occurred with various people, the owner of the land indicated that the excavation in the soil deposit was for the purposes of constructing industrial greenhouses. Various intentions were stated, all sorts of them, and you can read them here. It's going to be 20,000 square feet greenhouse of 40,000. It was going to be 2 to 5 units. It was going to be 1 unit. It was going to be square. It was going to be long. It was going to be 200 by 200. It was going to have a mobile home. It was going to have a farmhouse and a farm plate, or whatever. The trend there is clear, but the specifics are bouncing around like a ping pong ball. It depended on who you talked to at the time, including the people that were representing the land. The site is located obviously near the heart of Tsawwassen. It's surrounded by residential property on all sides, and the Southland Village is growing just down away from it. Industrial greenhouses on the Gishon property will impact literally hundreds of homes and thousands of people, particularly when illuminated. This is a map, and I apologize, we'll just focus on the map itself where the red arrows are pointing. You'll recognize what our parcel of land is in the lower part of the map. Those red arrows are existing industrial greenhouses in Delta, primarily Ladner and West. East Ladner and then West out towards the island. And you can see the closest one to the center of Tsawwassen is Howling in here, where I've got the cursor wiggling around here. That's in the order of 4 kilometers from the town center. Keep that number in mind. 4 kilometers from the town center. Over in here, this little map in here, I apologize for the size of it, but that shows the distance from the Gishon property to the center, basically the town center mall. It's 1.2 kilometers. It's less than a third of the distance. Just keep those numbers in mind. 4 kilometers from Howling and 1.2 from the town center. Is cannabis a factor? Well, not really at this time, but it could be. We never know for sure. whole cannabis thing in Delta is up in the air, federally Canadian is up in the air. Our thing was, no, it's not immediately, because it's not ALR. Delta controls. Delta has stated they won't allow growing of cannabis. The ALR lands, that's another question. Delta now has more control over what happens on those ALR lands, but it's a bit of a gray area if someone tries to walk through the rules. But cannabis at the moment is not the immediate threat from what we can tell. You might ask, well, how can you make money to cover that kind of debt, or that kind of purchase, if you don't grow something that's worth a lot of money? And that's an excellent question, and we do not have that answer. Our thing to Delta was we wanted to have a moratorium on any further activity regarding cannabis in Delta, and to apply to the feds and the province to support that moratorium. And this has been received. We met with the federal minister, Quattro, as well. This request has been met with considerable support. Whether anything will come of it, we don't know yet, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Public opinion. One of the keys for us, the Southlands fight, some of you will know, was a 35-some-odd-year battle. And the public, it was the longest standing public hearing in Canadian history, 6,000 speakers. It's unbelievable. And it went on for decades. Originally it was going to be many 30-plus story towers and all sorts of houses, 9,000 residences or whatever, we ended up with about 900. And it was going to occupy all of the land, including what the GBRD park on the other side of the road was settled earlier. It was not part of the Southland settlement, but the original proposals for Southland included the parkland as well. We currently have 1,300 and plus signed petitions and 215 online surveys completed. The overwhelming majority, I'm not talking, we don't need to worry about any sort of Florida recount in this stuff. You could throw a good number of them on the floor and it wouldn't change the numbers very much. We've got 1,500 people so far that don't want industrial greenhouses in Tsawwassen. Summary, industrial greenhouses, is it a real threat? Is it real, or is it a threat, or is it both? We have reasonable indications the landowner intends to install industrial greenhouses on the Guichon property in the heart of Tsawwassen. Given the most current purchase price, profit from industrial greenhouse operations does not appear possible. Industrial greenhouses will impact hundreds of homes, thousands of citizens. Recent real estate listings offering the property at over $23 million are shaded towards or explicitly state development potential. The various amenities called out on the listings are typically of more interest to home builders and home buyers than farmers. Industrial greenhouses have the appearance of a means to an end, as an evolving and growing threat and nuisance, rather than the end unto itself. So this is kind of a complicated bit of business. Just to remind you, what is our objective? To ensure the continued use of the Guichon property for open air soil-based farming. That is our objective. What did we do? We put together a 3-request package to Delta Council. Request number 1 is a tactical request, and it was to seek the injunction to have the soil deposited, removed, and the land and drainage restored to the way it was, in a timely manner. What has transpired, you can see I've edited, as of last night, there's a little bit of yellow text right in here and a cross out of the word on it. The ditch has been mitigated. We're not 100% pleased with it, but the work to improve, to restore the ditch has taken place. We have to be fair, it did take place. So that has been undertaken. The soil removal, we have to go back to the request being in a timely manner. And there is a time for this, and there is not a time for this. Right now, is, of course, in the rainy season is not the time for this. It hasn't been forgotten. It will probably occur at some point, but it's not occurring. Request number 3, we're going to jump from 1 to 3. And this is really working with the federal level to have further licenses and permits for cannabis growing in Delta suspended or moratorium to get caught up on just what is the need, the capacity and demand, the impact on the community, what kind of regulations and operations are required. That letter has been drafted. In Delta City, of course, we just changed the local council, and we are awaiting the release of that letter. I believe that will come from what we've heard. So I think that one's going to be now. The big kahuna here is request number 2, to put the land in the ALR. And following in the wake of the BC municipal election, the request is being reviewed by the new Delta Council. Again, a lot of support from the previous council and from what we hope will continue to have good support from the new council. And I'm going to leave this open to the question period because some of you will probably have a question about this. Why do we want it? And that's the end of this part of the presentation. Thank you very much. Questions? It's not a simple issue.
The fill, has it been tested?
No. It's up to the landowner to test it, and he's been asked to provide soil samples.
Who asked?
The landowner.
No, who asked the landowner to do it?
Delta requires it.
Delta requires it.
Yes. In theory, it's required before you dump the soil,
Right,
not after.
okay. Because it could be toxic.
That's one of our, in our beer drinking moments, is the talk of depleted uranium and the noted lack of vegetation going on in that soil.
Does it have a smell?
No, it doesn't, but what did you say? It's very grayish, clay look to it?
Yeah.
It's interesting, if you had an up-to-date picture today, you would find the areas that were, I'll call cleared out, they're actually showing growth. That deposit, you gotta look really hard for any growth on it.
Couple of pumps of
Might be
rice.
industrial waste.
So your, can I just interject? So your sort of working theory is that they want to put greenhouses in as an interim land use, which will make some money depending on the crops. It could be cannabis, that probably would. But given the market value of the property, if it could be used for residential development, the theory is that they just want to make greenhouses such a big nuisance that the community will support their zoning to residential.
In a nutshell, you summed up one of our major concerns. This is we believe it's an interim step.
Well, what's the quality of the land, the various grades of land, and how long has it been fallow?
It's never been found.
The quality of the land is A1 agricultural, and that zoning, or that designation, is the best farmland in British Columbia. The agricultural zoning runs from A1 to A7. A7 is rocky outcrops on top of a mountain. But A1 is prime agricultural, and to our knowledge, it's been farmed consistently, originally by the Guichons many, many years ago. And then Mr. Guichon lost the lease, and the new owners have leased it out to somebody else who's now farming it and raising potatoes. So it's currently raising potatoes and still acting as farmland.
I know of only 1 year where a farmer did not farm that land. It's since in the last 22.
Is there current?
Let's go to Rhiannon first and then.
Okay. Since industrial greenhouses are allowed on ALR property, aren't you increasing the chances of an industrial greenhouse being placed there if it's incorporated into the ALR?
That is a very good question, and so I'll attempt to answer that for you. The inclusion of the land into the ALR is a tactical consideration rather than a long-term one.
So it's to protect it from residential development rather than greenhouse.
So it's the strategic view would be looking at the end game, and this is a tactical move looking at that houses where the value has got to come from. What looks like the owner would want it to come from the houses, and houses don't grow on a hill on that. So there's, but your point is well taken. That interim step is difficult.
Yeah, risky.
Risky. So we've had to make some judgment calls and weigh the different options in making our choices.
You were mentioning about the distance of the other greenhouses from houses, from residential houses there, and the distance that this would be from the houses in Tsawwassen.
Yes.
Are there any standards right now on the distance that the greenhouses have to be from residential, and what is there an optimum for that?
Yes, there are, and this is one of the things that is being considered, and whether they should apply it or don't apply it. It's typically 150 meters, but there have been exemptions. 150 meters, of course, is about 500 feet. But we would not be satisfied with that, and I'll show you why. And I don't think you folks here should be too content either. The left-hand panel, again, I'm sorry, I don't know how to blow this up a little bit. It's in the hand. It's not in the handout. I have some maps here if you'd like to pass it. The left-hand panel is a circle of 4.1 kilometer radius, and you can see the radial line runs from the center of the subject property to Howling. That's the 4.1 that I mentioned. If you sit in the center of that property today on a low ceiling night, low cloud night, particularly in the winter where lighting is on, you can read a newspaper at that 4.1 kilometers using the light from the greenhouse. If we take that 4.1 kilometers and move that same analogy to the location of the Keystone property and redraw the circle, that's the right-hand map. And the yellow circle shows where that same level of lighting will prevail. It's not a highly scientific analysis, but it's a reasonable postulation. So pretty well just where we sit today, we may be able to sit out on your porch and read newspapers. Yes, sir.
Does the existing roadway that serves this 43-acre parcel, will it support the traffic necessary to develop a greenhouse, and will it support future residential use, or will it have to be improved in terms of widening, in terms of utilities, etc.?
The latter would have to be improved. It would be likely 6th Avenue. This property has an anomaly. Its official address is on 8th Avenue. But what Delta does when that occurs, and there's no physical access down the cliff from the graveyard, they have a ghost, or not a ghost number, a proxy address for where the physical access occurs. And that's off of 6th Avenue. So it's 5761 6th Avenue, but its official title is 8th Avenue. So 6th Avenue today runs into Forest by the Bay, and the dead ends where the property is. That has utilities, reasonable utilities. Sewage runs down the back of Forest by the Bay, northbound. Probably have to be some consideration, it's not a huge pipe. But in terms of to move all that in there, either to support residences or to support an industrial greenhouse, I believe an upgrade would be required.
I didn't get the last part of your statement. What?
To either support houses or an industrial greenhouse, you probably have to improve that road.
You say you, that the corporation
developer.
Delta would have to
Yes.
participate in that.
Yes, they would have
Do you know what the cost would be approximately?
to. No.
Just sort of, excuse me, sitting here listening to this, something just doesn't feel right about any of this. They're shelling out $23 million, which is double what it was sold for 1 year earlier.
Asking for that.
And
They're the people that own it now.
Land confirmation agents, land agents.
But
They
they'd
pay
be willing
12
to-
million each other.
They'd be willing to flip it for 23.
yes, they would sell it if someone came up with 23.
they advertised a willingness to sell it for $23.88 million.
They probably would take 13.
Today,
I want to take their million profit and go home. But the point is that if they had put that amount of money into this property already, and they're not going to flip it, I just don't see how they can generate enough income to cover that cash layout. It smells wrong. There's something funny about all of this, and I don't know how you find out what it is. But it just sniff, sniff, sniff.
No,
if somebody doesn't pass the sniff test, there's usually a reason.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a little bit of sniff test on your mission, what you're working on. If your objective is to maintain that particular piece of property as open air farming, do you have a direct way to get there? Because as I understand you right now, both the current zoning and the zoning you're supporting a change to, neither of them prohibit greenhouse supported agriculture. It's still agriculture, right?
That's right.
Okay. So basically then, the moves you're making, the tactical moves you're making, won't guarantee a different outcome here. I'm wondering, do you have a affirmative mission, something that you could do to permanently change the status of that land? Because right now, you're dealing with a lot of unknowns in terms of why they're listing it for that value, who's listing it, what happens in the private real estate market. Do you have a direct route to keeping that as open farmland? And is that more valuable to the community than greenhouse-based agriculture, for example?
Greenhouse-based agriculture, putting industrial greenhouses on that land would not be what the citizens of Tsawwassen want from what we can tell. We're pretty confident about that, given the result of our petitions and work. Talking to everybody. We didn't run into virtually anybody. Putting houses on that land is not something that's popular either. But because of the Southlands development already put a large number of houses, and it took 30 some odd years to get to that, plus what's been built on the TFN lands, plus what was built at Tsawwassen Springs, there is a huge inventory of homes coming into the marketplace within kilometers of that area. So, to answer, I think the latter part of your question is, I don't think the public wants greenhouses on that land. The first part of your question is, how do we play to the end game that you've identified that our moves to date have been interim and not sure. They don't have a set guaranteed outcome. Right. And you are 100% correct. Do we have notions of what might transpire? And are there ideas of what might transpire for the future to give a more surety to the outcome? Yes, there are some notions. There are some ideas. Unfortunately, I can't really discuss those at this time, because they're not public domain, and it wouldn't be fair to those. But we're not drawing ourselves short and saying, oh, we're done.
I'll interject a question. So greenhouses are an allowed use currently.
Yes.
Yeah, it's agricultural land.
If you don't encumber them with the cannabis question, the answer is
no. If they want to grow tomatoes,
yes.
by the way, I'm already irritated by what I call the northern lights of Point Roberts. When you look out to the north, you see that green bizarre
The green glow.
Green glow. So, and that's, you say that's 4 kilometers further. But anyway, so if they're a legal agricultural practice at present, unfortunately, perhaps, does the popularity amongst the neighbors, does it have any bearing under British Columbia law and land use law?
It's a very good question. The Agricultural Land Commission sets the rules for the agricultural land reserve. So this land is not in that reserve. So therefore, that doesn't fall in that purview. So at the moment, Delta controls the bylaws that are applicable to agricultural land. And it is possible to have bylaws that categorize agricultural land near the residential area differently from agricultural land in the areas that I showed you that's more isolated from communities. is this does appear to be possible, and it is one of the options that are open for consideration. That the previous gentleman was asking, is there a longer term view in play?
In Holland, there's loads and loads of greenhouses. If you look at the night sky maps, it's all white. And Holland has taken steps to mitigate the light, wasted light going up by requiring greenhouses to have louvered roofs or solid roofs to cut down the light pollution levels. If the buyer wanted to establish a grow up for cannabis, he could build a warehouse and have artificial lighting and use that source of lighting only with no sunlight, and that wouldn't bother the neighbors. And that would that appease the neighbors?
I don't know, it would not. But I don't like to take your question apart, but I have to. Right now, it's agricultural land under the control of Delta. Delta does not allow the growing of cannabis in greenhouses or otherwise. So if your question was, could he grow peppers on the land in a greenhouse on that land?
Or a warehouse.
Or a warehouse is a slightly different issue if there's no farming activity. There has to be agricultural activity, or the tax structure is no longer advantageous under that agricultural designation. So a warehouse per se, such as you see near the airport with BC Fresh, they have a warehouse for processing produce grown in greenhouses. That would not currently qualify for agricultural land because you may be able to do it, but you wouldn't have the tax advantages. And the tax advantages, if you zone that as residential or industrial or commercial land today, the tax bill would be huge. To give you an idea, Forest by the Bay is of a similar size, actually smaller, but Forest by the Bay kicks in just under $600,000 a year in taxes. So if you zone that same piece of land as residential or industrial, you look at that.
I noticed on the map on the right, it illustrates how Point Roberts is completely within this circle, that on a cloudy night we would have the light. And in Point Roberts, we like to see the stars. And there's probably maybe, I don't know how many, 6 street lights in all of Point Roberts. And I've heard some people say, how backward, you people don't even have streetlights. I said, that's on purpose. We don't want the light pollution. We want to see the stars. So I think for that reason, Point Roberts is as if, I don't know if Delta cares, but this would not be a good thing for Point Roberts.
Well, you're getting to really the purpose of the presentation here in Point Roberts. I mean, the question is, I mean, we have nothing, generally we have nothing to say about what happens in Canada, what decisions Delta makes, but there could be cross-border issues that, you know, like the radio towers that Delta helped us fight because they were a threat to Delta, just as they were to Roberts. There might be cross-border issues that they could give us a legitimate interest in what's going on down there, and light pollution is obviously one. And I wanted to ask you about impacts on migratory birds, which depend
other
on
terms like trespass.
soil-based farming don't really do very well with roofs of greenhouses.
No. The migratory birds, I'm not a bird person. So I think there's some experts on birds that know much more than I do about birds. I happen to have observed birds. That's about all I can say. They come in 2 tranches. We get the snow geese first, and they land on that property, and they land on the southwest properties. As a matter of fact, they're landing there now. They're in, that's the game afoot at the moment, is the snow geese. They were a little bit late this year, and perhaps not as plentiful. They seem to have an affinity for the field to the north of Walmart this year. I don't know why. There's a lot over there, and there's some on this property. But generally, there's a lot of snow geese. When they start thinning out or migrating wherever further to the south, we have another tranche of Canada geese and ducks. And they overwhelm the snow geese population, I don't know, perhaps 4 or 5 times more of those than we do of snow geese. You can get that piece of property holding birds, and you can come down into Forest by the Bay, and as you go down Golden Rock Crescent, if you get out of your car, you will hear a and you don't know what it is. It's like somebody running a tractor behind houses. And it took me a while to realize that's the birds. There are tens of thousands of them in there, and they will take the fields from being tilled or harvested potatoes. The grass is starting to come up, and they will eat the potatoes and, to be blunt, poop their way from one end of the field to the other, and the field will change from green to brown over a period of about a week. When the field is entirely brown, they go somewhere else. That's sort of the way it goes. And this seems to happen every year. So yes, it is on the flyway, and yes, we have a lot of birds that use that piece of property.
And is Vicki Huntington part of your group? Because she's come to our meetings and she's really expressed her concerns about stopping further industrialization of the flyway.
Vicki has been, we have contacted Vicki, and she was supportive, but at the same time, in terms of taking an official position, she was under contract to write the report on provide input to the report on the use of agricultural land for industrial purposes. And this report was in its final stages of composition and was then released, I believe, in September. So she was in a position where she couldn't really take a firm stance until the report was published. When you read the report that was published, you can see that.
Did you say that when the land gets moved to ALR, that the federal government gets involved and cannabis can be grown?
No, it's the provincial government.
Or provincial, sorry.
And
Provincial can
And
make
yes,
it.
so far cannabis can be grown.
So why would you want the designation to go ALR?
We don't believe that cannabis growing, or potato growing, or corn growing, or any sort of growing is the end game. We believe that growing of houses is the end game. And putting in the LR puts a roadblock up for houses. Very strong.
But you could end up with cannabis growing.
Ultimately, you could.
May I say, Elsie, the current thought from the federal government in terms of whether it's legislation yet, I'm not quite sure, but the plans are that unless the property already has greenhouses built as of, I think, June 30th of this year, it cannot be converted for cannabis, and no new greenhouses can be built for cannabis. So that's a plus on our side to the extent that there's no greenhouses there right now, therefore he cannot build greenhouses for cannabis. He could for tomatoes, seedlings, which is what he's claimed, nursery items, cucumbers, whatever. But for instance, right now in Delta, there have been a couple of large greenhouses which have been converted to cannabis, but they have been in existence from years earlier. In fact, Howling is even thinking about converting as well, because cannabis is 9 times the profit compared to vegetables.
Just as an aside to the lady about cannabis, we also have the opinion that this is a gold rush right now. Cannabis is what Barkerville was, what Northern California was, what Nome, Alaska was, what Klondike was. It is a gold rush. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is trying to grow cannabis. And we're going to be able to stone the world here. I hope this won't be a Don't write to me if you want free cannabis. I'm not the guy. But we're gonna have probably, at the end of the day, an overcapacity of cannabis production. And when that occurs, the market tends to do one of these, and you have an awful lot of excess capacity that has to be shed or perhaps turned back into peppers or whatever. So the whole cannabis thing is very tentative and confusing. And Roger's right, there are different rules about getting a permit. You need from Health Canada and you need from other people to get a permit. And what you're allowed to do is all, what we asked for was a moratorium, a stop, no more until it's clear what the capacity that is needed, how it impacts on the neighborhood. There's people in Aldergrove and out in the valley who, unfortunately, were next to a greenhouse growing peppers, converted to cannabis, and now have to live with this odor. And they've been very adamant that odor is not pleasant, and the way of solving the odor problem, believe it or not, is to spray Febreze. Not with a squirt bottle. They bring in basically an industrial sprayer, and on the corner of the property, they spray Febreze in the air to try to mask the smell of the
Okay. Maybe 2 or 3 more questions and.
Well, I'm just trying to get a handle on this. I could only hear half of what you said, of course. You didn't want to stand up. I understand that. But if I understand what your objective is to keep some, at least, of what is casually considered the richest farmland in North America from being abused. And the taxes, the tax structure, doesn't facilitate closed structures for growing. So the light pollution is something you have to swallow, whether you want it or not, if they approve one of these greenhouses. And the other side of it is, if you're successful in preventing any of this, won't the housing pressures grow to such a point that Gordon Campbell will have his way of creating a city, a second city comparable to Vancouver, out here on the flats?
That is a very big question. I don't know. I really don't think you're going to be able to get houses on that land without really difficult public hearing process. That would be, you can't just arbitrarily start, you have to go through the public hearing process. The last time took 35 years. You have to be very resilient, very determined, and have extremely deep pockets in order to persevere through that kind of opposition. I don't see Tsawwassen is ready to approve houses on that piece of land.
I'm very concerned about the birds and the flyways. I actually fly airplanes and fly over that other lake source a lot. I can see it really well from when I'm over White Rock. So if I'm a bird, that's affecting me for sure, especially if I'm flying up high. So I'd like to support you not to not have greenhouses in ways that we can, and if you can maybe inform us how we can help you, that might be helpful.
As an aside, that picture was taken from a 172 of the CBD by myself. I took them. So no one could complain that we're using someone else's pictures. We have made that mistake before. So, I appreciate it.
Do you want to answer the question about
how to help us?
how people
Signing the petition is very helpful. Getting other people to sign the petition is even more helpful. The multiplier effect is something that we're looking for. So if you belong to other groups that perhaps are not represented here today, if you're a member of another group, to spread the word with them and try to get them to sign on. Every single signature that arises on the survey, the online survey, or the paper petition is helpful. The more politicians listen to numbers, when you get that kind of 1,500 people out of a community that size that say, I don't want to do this, that puts politicians in a little bit of a pickle. What's going to be very interesting is
Delta Council, essentially, that you're trying to?
Yes,
yeah,
that is
okay,
correct.
that's
So
what I
that is
wanted.
the target.
Delta Council, you try to influence.
Yes.
Okay?
And it influences the provincial government
And
as
you
well.
try to influence them to make changes to the law such that maybe they don't allow the greenhouses,
That is
correct?
correct. That is correct.
Have you reached out to Andrew Weaver, sir?
Kind of jumping in.
You have a question in the back.
Hands been up for a long time.
Yeah, hi, guys. I was just, you probably are aware that Delta, City of Delta, it used to be called Delta Corp, has designated Delta as a sort of a rest and recuperation stop for the migratory birds, and there's roughly 5 million birds that do that. And my point is that that Bichon property is part of that rest and recuperation, just as we've talked about. The other thing is, if this monstrous greenhouse goes there, and we have this A1 designated soil, okay, really top soil, as it were, then this large greenhouse or greenhouses obliterates that soil because it sits on it. And that seems to me to be sort of stupid. I should have said that nicer, but that's what it seems like. And yeah, that's it for now. Thanks.
All right, I'm sorry for cutting you off. I'll go back to Jeff, and then one last question, and then I think we have to.
No, a question and a comment, sir. Have you reached out to Andrew Weaver?
No, not at this time.
I think, wouldn't that be a valuable ally?
It could be.
I think it most assuredly would be.
We're playing very hard, working very hard, and devoting ourselves as a small group, very focused at the time with local government. And local government has been very helpful and supportive and interested in this issue. So it isn't that we don't want to engage other levels of government. We
Right.
literally have started with the close at hand.
Yes, I understand.
And at the right moments, we have no reservations to reach further into federal or provincial.
I would just, my point is an observation. It's not lost on a fellow BCer that when Winnie Chung's name appears on any document, and Royal Pacific, it's the largest land compilation real estate person in Canada, specializing in high-density housing. Her sole interest, she has no interest in farming. So she has an end game as well, most assuredly.
We understand.
So your preemptive strike is well advised, I would submit.
We are aware of her
Yeah.
attributes.
Yes.
One last
No.
question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There is in the meantime, there is a review. You are aware of the casino review that took place?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. German, not a German man, but Mr. German was the author of the report on the casino aspect. He has been engaged.
You're talking about the town and country.
Yes. He has now been engaged to look at real estate transactions as well. And there is scheduled to be a report in the latter part of March is the deadline. Will this get extended? Often they do. They have to get additional time to do a proper job. So when that report comes out, it will be very interesting to see what are the recommendations regarding real estate listings that are inappropriate or, how do you say?
Red flags.
Red flags. And that this is agricultural land and yet it's being touted for residential purposes. Something is, there was a gentleman said there was an odor about certain things. So we'll have to wait and see what that report brings forth. And perhaps the real estate boards in the Lower Mainland or in British Columbia should be equipped or required to be more forceful in authenticating the listings and in taking action against listings which are inappropriate for the land type. You'll have to read between the lines a little bit there.
Yes.
So, but your comments are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
You said?
No, just one last comment. Is there any risk from your point of view that having petitions signed by Americans
That was my
could be
question.
counterproductive from the perspective of Delta?
I don't think so. Let me come back. We'll bring this petition up here The one that's online looks almost the same. So what the petition is, it doesn't say where you're, it does ask you where you're from, but what you're being asked to indicate is you're in favor or not in favor of industrial greenhouses and agricultural land in Tsawwassen. Now, you're in Point Roberts. You can't get much closer to Tsawwassen than being in Point Roberts. You're probably closer than if you were in Ladner or in North Delta. So these, we encourage these. If someone asks, we're very frank, we're very straightforward. If Delta asks how many of these petitions were signed by Americans or signed by people from Calgary, we've had the odd one come in from almost everywhere. We don't hold much back. We're pretty transparent. But I would encourage you to sign.
And that's on
www.ccods.ca. You can download this or you can fill it in, and Roger just conveniently, great move, Roger. Follow along a bunch of these.
One thing I can say is that during the battle over the towers, the radio towers 3 years ago, I personally met with 2 members of Parliament. And they were comfortable talking to Americans and having us involved in the project and working on both sides of the border. The other thing that strikes me, one of the things we found during that battle was the more we looked, the worse it smelled. The more we dug in through documents, official documents that have been filed with our Planning and Development Services and with the FCC, the more we found misrepresentations, lies. I mean, blatant things like whole communities of 20,000 people blanked out so that the FCC wouldn't know that they were there. I wouldn't be surprised if you are able to start digging in the official documents that have been filed by this company, that you will begin to see things like that. Because it just feels all right. It can't possibly be good with that.
May I say something just very quick?
One more thing, please. The problem that you've got, and you know this, is the whole running there is under tremendous pressure. And when that bridge goes up, the rush to this side,
another rush is
going to be huge. And so the pressure to build and develop in Delta is going to be enormous. And so I think it's extremely important to work with the MLAs and try to begin to get tighter zoning in anticipation of this rush. It's just going to taste. It's like you drive along Candy, all the houses are being torn down. And
SkyTrade produces another.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Okay, Armene, you are absolutely the last
Okay,
because we have.
and I'll make it quick. When we were working on the fighting the radio towers, the cross-border coalition, half Canadian, half American, I did petitioning, walked the streets in Tsawwassen and had people sign and gave them information. And they, especially close to the border, they were particularly against it. So if somebody wanted to collect Canadian petitions and walk, you don't have to be a Canadian to walk the streets of Tsawwassen with a petition and get Canadian signatures. So I sort of have one foot in Point Roberts and one in Tsawwassen right now, but I could see Jim and I on a sunny day walking around and getting some petitions signed. So because there's a couple of years ago, we found out there's 22,000 people live in Tsawwassen. They're moving in and building all these things, maybe 23, 24,000 people. So 1,300 is, and of course, a proportion of those are children. But 1,300 signatures is great. How many did we have on our petition that we sent to Parliament? Does anybody remember? We had tables set up at the town mall and everything, and people signed petitions and so forth. So if numbers are important, then maybe we can help with that.
I should say that your interest or your willingness to consider petitioning Tsawwassen is terrific. This is the paper version of it. Some people like paper. I mean, we're not going to argue about it. People like paper. They want to sign a piece of paper. Terrific. The online version has these same questions. They're equivalent. But it has a few additional optional questions. And one of those is, are you interested in volunteering to help us? Along those lines. And we would follow up, and especially if you say you're interested in helping with canvassing, someone will get back to you. It's not something that a lot of people want to do. So
That's guaranteed.
Steady work. Okay.
What's hard about online stuff is that probably 50% of the people in Tsawwassen are retired, and 50% of them don't even use computers.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people mail them in still. We thought that P.O. box was created for a reason. We were a bit taken aback by people actually mail stuff.
Good for candidates.
If they're working.
Let me say thank you.
All right.